Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Celtic Wheel with the Wisdom of Cycles in the Celtic Wheel with me, Mary Kennedy, and Katrina Brady, great astrologer living in Ireland. Do you want to say a quick hello, Katrina?
Yeah, hello everyone and welcome. And we're very excited to share with you our two perspectives on the autumn equinox, or the autumn equinox in this part of the world, anyway.
Yeah, that's what we will be. Yeah, we'll be kind of double clicking on the autumn equinox. I think and maybe at some stage we'll try and do it for the southern hemisphere as
Yeah,
well, because if you're watching from the southern hemisphere, of course, it's the spring equinox. So yeah, happy equinox. We're right on the day of the equinox, the 22nd of September. Katrina, do you want to say anything about the time or in astrologically?
yeah. So astrologically, the autumn equinox will be when the sun moves into Libra at 0 degrees of Libra, which is actually at 2:30 p.m. on the nose today in Dublin time. So
The 22nd. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we are here as we have been for the last couple of Celtic festivals to share, the wisdom from both of the traditions, the Celtic tradition and the astrological tradition, um, just to really bring us more into the intelligence of these cycles and working with these cycles. I know in my life it has completely changed how I show up in the world, and even show up with myself. So that's been an amazing gift. So that's really why certainly my intention here is to bring that wisdom to you. I'm here with the last flowers of the summer, as we move into the autumn equinox. We're well into autumn in the Celtic tradition of the last rose of the summer here, but it's really autumn and has been autumn since Lunasa, our last festival, at the beginning of August. So now we're into the final festival on the Celtic Wheel. So let me just share my screen and we'll bring up the festivals. Let me just open that up a little bit. So here we go. This is the Celtic Wheel, and we have come the full cycle almost since Samhain, which it was at the first festival, the new year in the Celtic Wheel, Celtic year, Samhain. So we have journeyed all the way around through until we come to this last festival at the autumn equinox. So the autumn equinox is, of course, equal night, equal day. Um, that balancing of energies. It's the end of the harvest. It's the final harvesting, um, and it is as I said, that last festival. Now, from now on, between now and Samhain, which will be October the 31st, the fixed day is October the 31st, in and around the end of October, beginning of November. Between now and then, we will be gently releasing from the masculine energies of doing into the more undoing, into the more feminine energies of undoing, of surrender, letting go, um, which will really, as when we move into the gamma half of the year, which starts at Samhain, the dark half of the year really starts at Samhain, and we're moving out of the Samos, the light half of the year. So that's where we are in the cycle. Um,
you can really feel that beautiful anticipation in the year, in the air, really, of diving deeper into that. I love that sort of the crispness in the air of autumn, but then you're noticing the day is a lot darker, in a sense. But yeah, but
yeah,
that
it's so interesting. Yeah,
anticipation.
and this is what I love about, working with these cycles. You become really aware of those really subtle changes that, where before I wouldn't have been aware until kind of we were well into the darkness. So this is where, like, you're more heightened awareness of those subtleties, which is beautiful. And I'm really aware of, this morning, even waking up quite early, it was still dark. So that's kind of, really interesting that the darkness is much more coming in. It's now going to be dominant from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, just maybe I'll give well, Katrina, do you want to say something about the astrology, or do you want me to give the wheel? You know what the I'm going to share some of the themes from the Celtic tradition around this time and some of the practices and the rituals.
Yeah, sure. So with the autumn equinox, so similarly with that chart that you have, um, the autumn equinox, when we're looking at sort of astrology cycles, you know, you could compare it to the second quarter moon within the moon cycle. So within that, there's that sort of ethos of reflective action. You know, you're entering the last quarter of the cycle. You know, there's this anticipation that the cycle is coming to an end, an acknowledgement of the ending of the cycle. And it's like right that feeling of like right before you tip into it, you're like, okay, the cycle is coming to an end, what can I do? But it's not only just about sort of that act of doing, but it's also looking at the cycle that's happened, you know, so looking back into this past year, you know, looking back, well, what has happened in my life since the winter solstice or from Samhain last year as well? And, you know, what wisdom has been gained through this experience? You know, what have, you know, upon reflection, what truths have I tapped into? And, you know, when we're tipping into the more feminine part of the year, the darker part of the year, it's like, well, what truths do I want to be at the core of the actions that I take as well? You know, I think is a sort of important um, thing to remember as we sort of go into this part of the year as well. So,
Yeah, and that very much, you know, echoes where we are in the cycle of the Celtic tradition and the whole theme of endings, the final harvest. That what we do is on the Celtic Wheel, we look back at what's the harvest that is here since Samhain, since we started the festival, and wow, did we have a challenging year, you know, in terms of COVID and you know, so what's the wisdom gained? There's always wisdom to be gained. What are the learnings? You know, what did you find out about yourself? Maybe, you know, I know at Samhain, last Samhain, I let go of very much doing everything on my own. That was one of the things I let go of myself, and I really worked with that through the years. So now I'm looking back with that harvest, looking back, well, how did that work out for me? You know, am I still doing things on my own and not moving more into that collaborative way of being? So I'm glad to say I really worked with that edge in me and let it go and let the joy of bringing more people into my team and just working more with people. It's been a great joy. So maybe I'll share the three. Well, let me maybe say first how the Celtic, you know, what the traditions were, both from, you know, there is really no very little evidence that the Celts celebrated the autumn equinox. Certainly the pre-Celts did, because Lough Crew, the Slieve na Coilg up in Meath, that is aligned to the sunrise on the autumn equinox as it is on the spring equinox. So there was definitely some ceremony or some kind of ritual around that time. But also we can pull, or we can certainly assume in some way that, you know, often Christian festivals are connected, or the Christian festivals that followed after the Celts, they often were absorbed, the old rituals and the old practices were absorbed into the Christian tradition. And we have Michaelmas on the 29th, which celebrates St. Michael on the 29th of September. So, and, you know, so we can conclude that there was definitely some kind of ritual celebration, harvest celebration, ending the cycle. So really the three ways that are the three themes that I would work with to bring that ancient wisdom more into contemporary life is, the first is this harvesting. Go back since last October, the end of October last year, and just spend some time, you know, harvesting what what wisdom has been gained, what learnings, you know, how you have changed. And we have had a year that I think we can all do well to reflect on. as we move into the next cycle. The second, the second theme that I would, or way I'd work with this, is really the Celtic way and the Celtic consciousness of honoring endings, you know, and endings in any cycle are so important. When I started to do the Celtic Wheel, I really saw this is a piece that I never did. I was just kind of fly by the seat of my pants, move from one task to the next, one project to the next, one relationship to the next. I never really paused at the end. And so, you know, even if you're in a stage of life that's ending, or, you know, a relationship, or there's a lot of endings happening individually now with COVID and also collectively. So we can really do well to do what the Celts did, which was they paused, they took stock, they they also, you know, put away all the tools, and then they, as my teacher Dolores Whelan says, they exhaled. This is the exhale part of the cycle. So that's a really beautiful thing to do, to just look back, take stock before you move into the next thing, the next cycle, the next stage. um, and yeah, and I think an important piece of that, because at this time the last sheath of grain was cut in a ritualistic way, and that came through in the folklore and the folk traditions. So that there's something really beautiful for me about that. It's like what needed to be preserved, because then that was stored in the barns or in the houses, and it felt like it was imbued with a lot of wisdom and knowledge, that actually it would then be passed on to the new grain in spring. So I think this is again a really important piece around, there's an ending happening, but what do we want to bring with us? What do we want to preserve? Because we do know the world is collapsing in many ways. The old world is over and collapsing around us. So what out of that old world, there have been amazing things out of the old world that we want to preserve and bring with us. So preservation, innovation, that important piece of the cycle, that we don't just move and leave everything behind, that we become very we become discerning about what do we want to bring with us, and what then do we want to start to leave behind as we move towards Samhain, which will be the main question of what needs to die now. And then the third piece is this, of course, we return to the masculine, feminine, the polarity of the equinox. So at this time in the southern or in the northern hemisphere, we're moving out of the very masculine mode of summer into the feminine mode of the dark half of the year, the time to renew, the time to move inwards, to go deep, and the importance of moving into that time, which is embracing the fallow time, a time of dormancy, all of that. So we're moving in, there is that movement of equal night, equal day, equal masculine and feminine. So it's a great way to work with that, is to look at your life and see, okay, how am I dancing with these two energies, these two natural energies that are the foundation of, universal energies of doing and being, of, being out in action, being more inward in contemplation. So and again, how am I producing, am I constantly out in the world and not taking time to rest and renew? So just to again look at your life, it's a great time to work with that, and maybe see where's your edge, and what's the one that you tend to be more habitually in, and can you pick up the other polarity and start to practice that more, because what we practice we become. So those are my three pieces. The harvesting from the beginning of this, the final harvest from the cycle. The second one is the how to really honor endings and do them consciously, work with them consciously. And the third is that masculine feminine mode within yourself. How are you showing up around that?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
So my three would, just going back to that cyclical wisdom, which I think your second point very much sort of ties into that as well, which I was saying earlier about, that sort of reflective action, that we're tapping to at the moment. And I think there's something really beautiful when we're moving into, where we're starting to move into the ending part of the cycle. cyclical knowledge is that, yes, an ending is starting to happen, but out of that ending, a new beginning always arises as well. And I think that's something that is so important. We're always in a natural container, we're always being supported and we're being held, so I think that's one of the most important teachings that using cycles can offer us, really, is that, well, I may be entering a darker phase of my life. I might be going through something difficult. We're entering, the darker half of the year, but the light comes out of that, the next, with the winter solstice, that's the second part of that. And that's, when we start to see the light, we welcome the light back in as well. So I think it's just sort of a beautiful acknowledgement of that too. And the second piece is, with the energy of Libra is cardinal air. So very much how your teacher said, it's the exhale out, the air element with the cardinal energy, it is that exhale, it's the out breath, it's air energy is tapping into the unseen, it's our connection with spirit, our connection with wisdom, and it's that release out, so even if that is taking a deep breath and having that release, or if it's about sharing, all of the wisdom that we've sort of cultivated over the past year, there's that expression of it that is sort of important. So, one takeaway from that would be, well, in terms of the wisdom that I've accrued over the past year, what do I want to be at the base of my actions? What do I want to be at the base of how I communicate with others going into the darker part of the year as well? If we kind of think about it, in the darker part of the year, we spend more time at home, we spend more time in communion with our loved ones as well. So it's like, how do I want to center, the way that I'm expressing myself, going into this more feminine part of the year as well. And the third part of this too, with the equinox chart for this year, it's connecting with Ceres. Within the Blue Rose School of Astrology, we teach Ceres as the Earth Mother, in the sense, but that also she sort of rules the use of cycles, cyclical wisdom in a sense too. So it feels important to sort of acknowledge as well that even if, we're talking about cycles, even if we feel like we're looking back into the year and we feel like, well, 2020 has really, maybe in my personal life, there's been a lot of stuff going on, maybe I've felt really caught up with like everything that's been going on in the world. Maybe I was so caught up really use the cycles in a way that I want to. It's like, even if we feel like we didn't get to take the opportunities that this year presented to us, in a sense, stepping out into nature, stepping out into the change of the seasons, it is always there. The earth is always there. This change of the seasons is always there. So this wisdom is always there. So even if we feel like, we haven't been making the most of it, it's always there to hold us and to support us. So, so I think it's important even today or this week to really go outside and take a walk and feel the wind, feel that connection, that the wind reminds us of the unseen, that, even if we feel like we can't see, the silver lining in things, that there's always sort of an invisible force holding us, that's made visible through the change of the seasons, as well. So I think that's sort of an important thing to remember for this one as well.
Beautiful, yeah. And one of the ways we've been celebrating it on the Celtic Wheel journey is we've just went out and created a mandala from all the, the lovely leaves, the flowers, the last flowers, and we've just, that's a beautiful practice to do a mandala, take an hour and a half and let it become a meditation as you look back on the year. Or, I mean, of course, the most important thing is you get out into and feel that change in the season. And at the same, and be with, maybe an Imram, that great tradition in the Celtic tradition, which is just a wandering in nature and asking maybe for some wisdom from nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it is, these days are so intense, and they're, it feels like there's more intensity building. I'm sure it's in the stars. Feels again, we had a slight reprieve, and certainly here in Ireland, over the summer, but it feels like everything is ramping up again with COVID 19. So I hope that, this wisdom can help you. I know that this helps me sit into that intensity, and know that there's a bigger cycle happening here, and know that we are in a death phase, on the planet and in humanity. And I know that the spring will come again, and that's one of the great blessings of really working with this tradition, and also with astrology. I think that's an amazing, that things will pass. I know it's not great consolation, but that it's, if we can really stay in our center, stay sovereign, even if we keep being pulled out, that's such an important piece. Yeah, and I,
The fact
yeah,
that everything is always transitioning and moving and flowing, even if we can't really see that, in the moment, we're always in a state of flow on some level. So I think that's, yeah, as you say, does feel like intensity is building, again. So
Yeah, and to drop into cycles for me is a much softer way of being in the world. It's more cyclical. It's less linear. It's so, when we live in straight lines, it's not sustainable. We break easily. When we move more in both linear and cyclical, we're much more sustainable. We're much more agile and able to change. So that's a great blessing of this for me. Um, so yeah, and I just want to mention that the doors on my Celtic Wheel program for women, which gathers women from all around the planet to work with the wheel throughout the year, is the doors for that, or my registration is opening on the 1st of October. And we'll be starting with a whole new cycle on the 30th of October. So yeah, I'll leave that link down in the show notes below. But yeah, I just want to say, yeah, that it's this is the time of year that I feel, oh, it's so sad to be at the ending of one cycle, and yet that's part of what we learn, or what I've learned, is we gotta let go and to move into a new cycle. Um, so that's a great lesson. So thank you, Katrina. Thank
oh,
you so
thank
much.
you. As always,
Uh,
it's a pleasure talking about these things.
yeah, it's so great, isn't it? I feel so blessed, and so um, nourished by this. So we'll say goodbye from here, and see you at Samhain, the next festival.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, everyone.